Hello, everybody. Welcome to Two Wizards and a Mic, where a couple of old dudes talk about D&D, and then we try to give you information, tips, pearls of wisdom that might make your game better. And it's the holidays, so you know what? We're having uh, bit of a holiday shine to the show. There we go. A little snow on the screen. Why not? So it is December, and I hope that everybody caught the live stream we did a couple weeks ago for the closing of the latest Kickstarter. And it's been a couple of weeks. Any updates on the Kickstarter at all? I'm not. I maybe not. I don't know. What's going on?
Hey Shane. Yeah, so we've got two Kickstarters to talk about. The World of Mir one. We just finished the World book that we're doing a 200-page book on our World of Mir setting. It's going to be for any RPG. And we're waiting right now for Kickstarter to put the funds through. So some of these things take longer these days. So that should happen hopefully tomorrow. And then the next step is to send out this survey that goes out to all the backers where they have an opportunity to add on other books. And also we have stickers for some of the monsters that we include.
Very cool.
Yeah, so a chance to add on the Monster Series books to the Mirror Kickstarter and other books that we've written, and some new books that are extras to the World Book. So we'll have a book with every single inn and tavern in the world. We'll
Nice.
have another book that has a detailed history, like timelines for every continent. And then we'll have another book that goes into depth about all the factions in the world. And
Nice.
what we did to make it easy this time is all the books other than the monster books, everything is $5 Canadian, which is about $4 US. So it's very straightforward. Hopefully, I'll have that out in the next couple of days. For sure, it should be out before the end of the week. And the plan for that Kickstarter is finish the manuscript in January, start the art in January and February, and the layout. And then hopefully it'll be ready March or April in digital form and then shipping March or April. The other Kickstarter, which is right behind me, this is the first print of the Monsters of the Dungeon book, the Kickstarter from the spring. And it took a while to get this. There's one tiny mistake, but it's something I want to fix. So that new version should be on its way to the office shortly. And
Nice.
once I've checked that, then I can start mailing out these printed versions, um, probably in January, out to the backers from the spring. So yeah, right now we have a publishing machine here.
Well, I mean, you are a publishing machine. I mean, you've done it so many times now. It's almost old hat, and like you have like the fact that you got the print and were able to go through it and identify because you screenshotted the mistake and sent it to me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's actually kind of a weird printing error, and you were like, yeah, it didn't show up that way. But the fact that you paused long enough to look and to make sure the quality of the book was up to your standard, I mean, to me, that is probably a skill that a lot of Kickstarters probably don't have. I've actually I've seen a lot of product from Kickstarters, and they're kind of bad, but
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on Kickstarter for sure. There's only certain people I would trust these days. Um, we've made mistakes. Our books haven't been perfect. It's got better. And so this one, yeah, I found it's funny because, like you said, it didn't show up in the PDF, but when it was printed, one of the images is completely covering up a little bit of writing. Um, and it's not a major thing, but it's something that we can fix. And I think waiting 2 more weeks is it's worth it to do that.
yeah.
And we want to obviously give the best book we can each time. And I think we've improved. And we definitely take a lot more time now editing and checking the book than we used to. It used to be a matter of weeks, and now it's a matter of months.
Which I think taking the time to do that is important. Like even the player's manual from Wizards, back when they first launched it, Didn't it
Yeah.
have like a
Oh,
binding problem where the binder, like the actual binding on the edge of the book, would fall
yeah.
apart?
Well, and not only that, you're right. The player's handbook and I think the monster manual both there were major issues with the binding, but also, it's funny sometimes somebody will find a mistake that's in the book, and there's a few in Phaland, a few in Underworld for sure, but somebody will say, how come you didn't catch that? And we have errata pages that we give to people on the with drive through, and now I'm going to add them to our website too. So when you get the PDFs, you'll get the corrections. But there's not very many. And if you compare it to the Wizards books, you should see their errata for the 5e core books. It's page after page after page after page. And yeah, and they have a lot bigger team than we do.
And that's the reality is that they have well, actually they've got what 1,100 less staff members or whatever the heck it is.
Well, that
Uh,
was all of
was that across?
Hasbro
That was
though.
I was gonna say, yeah, but that was
Yeah,
multiple companies, I think.
yeah,
But yeah, but for you, I mean, there's you and uh, what, two, three other people for once in a while, and then as you were
yeah,
pointing out last time or during the Kickstarter, like the finale, um, it's basically you and Travis now.
yeah. We
Oh, he's frozen. Yes. So as I was pointing out, Travis and Andrew are going to be the only ones doing the next book. They are working very hard at it. It will be out next year. I hope I get my copy just like everybody else because he's a trustworthy guy, and definitely there's nothing shady at all. That Cawood Publishing is right down to you know he's able to do all kinds of cool stuff that's amazing, and I certainly hope that when you get the book, you're able to go through it, and hopefully there won't be too many errors. I mean, and as Andrew said, there's definitely going to be a chance of that with such a small team. But that's the reality of publishing, man. It's all of these things that you can't. Uh, you can't you can't I mean to me it is a way to appreciate the actual art of that of self-publishing. Like there's a lot of things that you have to get done, and oh my god, thank you, he's back. As I was just rambling on about appreciating small publishers. um Hi.
Hi, yes, yes, out here in the wilderness, on the edge of the wilderness. I guess our internet is having an issue tonight.
But that's okay. I mean, it's pouring with rain, and that can have a problem or can have an effect.
Yes.
Um, but anyway, but on to a lot of the stuff that we were talking about earlier. There's a lot of drama going on right now, and you were
Hmm.
sending me videos, basically of individuals reviewing different books that have come out, or sorry, different gaming systems, essentially.
Hmm.
Um, and but I gotta say that as fascinating as some of that stuff was, there was definitely that element of drama in the background that is highly addictive, and you kind of want to know more. But I tell me what fascinated you with these particular videos you were sending.
Well, I just think overall, it's funny that this is a gaming industry, and like I would think the end goal would be to have fun with your friends playing a game. But there are definitely people in the industry who are out there just for money and they'll do anything for that.
Yeah,
Um, they'll make promises. They'll hire questionable characters, and it is interesting. And all the drama around, what edition you should play. And now we're trying to make our products for every kind of RPG possible, right?
yeah,
For 5e stat blocks, we now have conversion tables for Pathfinder and some OSR games like OSE and DCC. And ultimately, like I said, for me, it's like about playing a game and about creating products that help people's games and hope they enjoy their game and enjoy the product. And it's interesting to see when all this other stuff comes into it, right? When there's companies making millions of dollars, um, when people are making promises, when there's games being created and books that are being created that really have no substance at all, and they're getting a lot of money and a lot of people are supporting them, but actually there's not really much of a product. And that's the reality. And some people figured that out with Kickstarter. It is not a store. It is you're part of a creative process, and you are trusting the creator to make something worthwhile and of a certain kind of quality, and you're giving them your money, and with this trust, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting how there's that there's the industry has attracted certain people who have a lot of other goals.
And do you think that Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all of these kinds of platforms that allow people to raise money,
Hmm.
um, are they? What would you say? Is there like which way does it skew? Is it the whole bunch of people that have joined the platform to basically make money and not really make a great product, or are they? Or is it still kind of a 50-50 thing, or is it only kind of a few, the bad apples in the barrel kind of thing?
Well, I personally know some small third party companies who are actually have really good intentions and don't make a lot of money off Kickstarter, but make enough to make some good products and put them out. The first company that comes to mind, a small company called Limitless Adventures in the US. But I would say that a lot of the larger Kickstarters, I haven't seen a lot of quality. Let's put it that way. And I personally have bought a couple of those books and learned the hard way that
Right.
yeah, I think you really have to do some research into who you're giving your money to and what they've made. And sometimes you can listen to someone, they possibly have a YouTube channel or they're on Twitter or something, and or X, and you can hear the person talk for a while and sort of get a good idea of what's this person like, and maybe talk to other readers, other followers of them on social media, and maybe get some hints into what kind of product they might make. It's difficult these days too because a lot of the reviewers, there's a lot of dishonest reviews in gaming, right? I mean, it's been happening in video games for years
Yeah.
and years and years, and in movies, right? So, people, because these some video games and movies will actually, give perks to the reviewers, right? And you'll hear these glowing reviews, and then the game comes out or the movie comes out and it's just awful. So the same thing happens in RPGs. There are people out there who'll just do a review without even looking at the product, right?
That's absolutely twisted. Like, why?
Yeah, yeah.
What? Why would anyone
Oh
do?
yeah, and people, it's also like there's a rigged system to a certain degree, right? Because you would assume that a website that's selling products wouldn't, help their own staff make money, for example, off the products.
Right.
And that's not exactly how things work behind the scenes. Um, and some of these people who are doing reviews actually work for the people that they're reviewing, or they're really good friends with them. So there's a lot of things behind the scenes going on that most gamers don't know about. And it would be great if most of the companies were like that company I mentioned and were these honest, hardworking third-party companies. Um, but that's not the case.
Well, yeah. I mean, I always pick on a this Firefly themed cookbook. From this is going back to when Kickstarter wasn't that old,
Yeah.
and I remember it being all like the imagery they were using looked great and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, the end product was basically just like a Word document that you got that had this cookbook instruction list of different recipes and things. Um, and there was no imagery, there was nothing because they had a falling out with whoever was laying it out and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And they just ended up giving out this really horrible thing. And I think people were loud and complained, but
Hmm.
the person making it didn't realize just how much work this would take.
Right.
And and they gave up. I think that's probably a problem with Kickstarters, is that if people get sort of bogged down with
Hmm.
how much work it actually is going to be, and they haven't quite uh, banked that into their mind that, okay, once the money's in, I have to do these 10 steps to get to the goal.
Right.
But and then end up running away, of course running away with the money too. Although what kind of, I guess there's protections on Kickstarter, but maybe not. I actually don't know.
Not really. You're, like I said, you're part of a creative process. So you're trusting that this person is gonna, create a great product, a worthwhile product that you're investing in. However, as long as they can show that they attempted to do something, from what I
Right.
understand, there's not a lot that can happen. Like, because you are part of this process. It's not a store where you're guaranteed you've purchased this. Of course, if you're a company that has some integrity, you should be you should be providing what you've said you're going to do, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance, right?
Right. True.
I mean, things happen, but um, it's interesting that a lot of times when questionable products have been made, it's the larger Kickstarters, right? It's people who have got hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. It's not someone who's raised $200, So
Why do you think that is? Is that just because of inexperience, or are they actively trying to deceive people? I I find it hard to believe that they would do it intentionally, but then again, I have you're far more familiar with these individuals
yeah,
historically, so
well, there's definitely some intention there, because I've seen firsthand there's companies who've made 100, $200,000 on Kickstarter, and they haven't even mailed out the book yet, and they're already collecting money from a new Kickstarter for 100,000.
right.
And then when the book actually comes out, there might be some nice reviews of it, but if you ever and you might find one person who thinks it's useful, but um, they disappear. Like, I'd like to see somebody come up with a list of like really great books that have been created, by Kickstarter for D&D in the last 10 years. And I don't think it's a really long list.
I would agree, because I mean I'm curious. I mean I've supported stuff on Indiegogo before, but I never really gave it much thought, because Kickstarter was always that thing that was popular, and you could see all these great creative products that were in theory going to be coming through. Um, but there were far more stories in the news about, you know, Joe Smith was going to invent this, that, and the other thing, like some
Yeah,
really incredibly ambitious thing. They get like, $10 million or whatever it is. Um, but then end up the product ends up not working for whatever reason.
right,
And I recall there was one that was like an armband that you could have on your arm, and then it would project a screen onto your skin or something, and it just was not something that actually was that practical and didn't really work. And but it had a great presentation, but it never really went anywhere. The product was never made.
right,
And and those kinds of stories always, before I even started supporting anything on Kickstarter, kept me away from Kickstarter, which is why I went to Indiegogo, because Indiegogo has a different idea where you can create a product, but if you don't reach your monetary goal, you can still basically say, okay, we're short X number of dollars. Uh, we're going to try to make it anyway.
yeah,
Or they just say, no, it's not going to happen. and it's kind
Right.
of their decision, not necessarily Kickstarter. I gather if you don't hit your goal, that's it. No, nothing happens. Is that
Hmm.
yeah? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like both systems, but they kind of have their pros and cons. Um,
I'm pretty sure Indiegogo, the big difference too is you get the money if you don't reach your goal. Like you just get that amount. So some people like that a lot better because they're guaranteed to get what they're, what they've made. Where Kickstarter, you could try to raise, $5,000, and if you get 4,500, you get zero
I'm just looking to see on Kickstarter what is the most funded Kickstarter. Like what amounts are we talking? And
for D&D.
no, for anything in general.
Oh,
But
it's going to be
I'm curious if
10.
D&D is up there.
Well, yeah, the one for the cartoon series might be. It was quite a
The
few million.
Vox Machina or what Mech
Yeah.
or whatever it's called. Yeah, okay.
That one was probably up there, but yeah, probably 10 million, something like that. Probably is like up near the top, 10 million US or something.
11.3 million for that one. 11.4.
Yeah.
That's some change. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
I think also Mystery Science Theater did that as well, if I remember correctly. They for their Netflix thing, they actually raised money for it, and then
Hmm.
Netflix bumped them up. I'm assuming with some production stuff, but I don't know. I guess that you just have to really love what you want to support there, and yeah. But
Yeah.
even when a product does get made, was the video you sent, was that actually a Kickstarter? The one that has like no voting
I'm pretty sure
system?
they, yeah, a lot of the companies, even these big companies that have millions of dollars, are using Kickstarter, which is actually taking away from the independent creators.
Obscura, Candela,
Yeah, I think that was a
Obscura. Yeah,
Kickstarter. Pretty sure.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be funny to see how much money it made. That's for sure.
But it definitely was a. Well, explain what that is. What is Candela Obscura? Like why?
Well, it's an RPG, and this week and last week, people have been reviewing it, and there are people who say that they enjoy it, but again, I wonder about those reviews because most of the reviews that I've seen say that the mechanics are missing from the book, almost like the RPG game is actually missing from the RPG book, and that most of it is advice about how to be a good person when you're playing role playing games, which usually is a lot of virtue signaling these days.
It is that kind of how shall I say? That's the kind of
Era.
world we're in at the. Actually, yeah, definitely. Oh my lord.
Yeah. Although I think it's, the tide is turning, and I think Canada, unfortunately, is going to be behind the curve,
Right.
because I think it is changing in other places faster.
What in what way?
Well, I think the difference in Canada is that it's got institutionalized. So here it's in the universities, it's in companies, especially, and it's part of their corporate structure now. Where I think in the US, things have been moving away. There's always lots of shifts in society. And I think the pandemic, that had some effect as well. Um, and I think technology too. I think if they weren't so absorbed by technology, that a lot of this wouldn't be happening in the same way. Um, because a lot of people are able to live in bubbles now, right?
Oh god, yeah.
You can hear the content you want to hear. You can read the content you want to read, see the movies you want to see. So you are less likely to run into people who, don't agree with you, have different views from different cultures. Um, if you spend a lot of time online.
I wish I didn't spend as much time as I do online, but I work online. Sadly, it is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, as you were pointing out with some of the stuff you were sharing earlier. This Kickstarter system and everything surrounding it seems to be very drama filled these days, and which kind of points out that there's something wrong. Like there's something falling apart out there uh, that I can't
Yeah,
quite put my finger on, but
yeah. Well, the community is kind of fractured into different places now, right? Like I only came back to playing D&D when just before 5e sort of came out officially when they were doing the play test. So they did this play test of the 5th edition with like hundreds of thousands of people, which was a really good idea. And I think there are great things about 5e. Um, they are definitely not the adventures and the some of, like you say, some of the drama that's come along with it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
there are good things. Some of the system, I think, mechanically is really smooth. But there are definitely, there's all these factions who play different editions, and that's fine. I mean, I think the idea that you have to tell someone, no, that's not a good idea. You can't play that way is pretty silly. Of course, people can make their choices, and yeah, and now there's, I think part of it is in the United States politically, it's very, um, things are very polarized, and in Canada there's
yeah.
some of that, but I don't think to the same extent. And some of that, like cultural, um, some of those cultural divides have now found themselves into the gaming world as well.
Yeah,
And
true.
again, I think to me, it's ultimately about playing a game and for people making products for the gaming world, making something fun and inspiring. And I think all this other stuff is noise. And for the most part, you know, it, it's it's getting in the way of really what could be a great community. And I think if you mute the trolls, basically, you can still have a good community, but you might have to mute a few hundred people.
Which on X I understand is getting harder because they want to remove that ability to block people or some
Well, blocking, yeah,
sarcasm.
I think they are considering taking blocking away, but you can definitely, I don't think they have any issues with muting. And right now you can do both. Um,
Right.
although blocking, some people try to get you to block them just so that, that they they think they've had some impact in the world. Um, but I know, like for Cawood Publishing, we make trolls all the time for a living, so it's pretty easy to see them and know how to deal with them. And
True.
I can, I know trolls pretty well. I know what they look like, sound like.
You can smell them from a mile away.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
oh
yeah. I
yeah,
saw your tweet. You say it's so
yeah.
sad. It's so sad.
Well,
Um,
I think, it doesn't have to. I don't think it has to really have any. Again, it's about, if you feed these trolls, if you feed this drama, then it's going to have an impact. If you ignore it, if you don't take part in it, it's going to help create a better community for sure. And I think most people actually are, those are the gamers that are there. I think the extremes, trolls on both extremes, are a small community. I think the bigger community are people who want to play games.
I agree. I mean, and that's the biggest component to D&D is as you and I always have said, that it's merely a game, and we've repeated this so many times, but I
Yeah,
still think it bears repeating. Is that there's this uh, addiction that people have to wanting to get into the weeds and have in-depth discussions about how things are right or wrong,
yeah,
and when it comes to a game, I mean, if you don't like a rule or you think there's a rule missing, then just add it. Like
right.
it's if you're running the game and it's your table, then just do it. Like there's no reason, D&D's, in the DM's guide and whatnot, they're actually just, it says, hey, these are guidelines. There's not
Yeah,
necessarily, we're gonna show up at your house if we hear you're playing the game wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess I just really refuse to jump into conversations like that, uh, online because it's not something that I think is really that important.
Oh
It's
yeah,
important to them, sure,
for
but
sure, for sure, 100%. I think we can just talk about this a little bit more tonight instead of going save our other topic for another day.
I know I
Yeah,
was looking at the time and I was like,
yeah,
oh, we haven't even gotten into that yet.
yeah. Because the other thing, I think a real big issue is the intellectualization, easy for me to say, of of anything. But when it comes into gaming, that causes so many issues. So the first thing it does is it starts splitting people off because you're comparing and you're saying my way is better, right?
Yeah,
And you have these different factions of old school gamers and new gamers, and then there's also new gamers who play old school rules who don't like other old school people. There's all these silly arguments, and some like very hateful people too,
yeah,
who you know who who again, that's why there's a mute button. um, the other thing that I think is an issue is when people overthink the game and they go off on these tangents, and like this idea about, again, about the monsters. We did a whole video about this, about how they know what they're doing. Well, they don't know what they're doing, how the game is designed. So as your character gets more powerful, then you come into contact with cleverer creatures and NPCs that will be more challenging. But most people only play the game till about 10th or 12th level, around there. So most of the time when you're going to be playing D&D, sort of levels 1 to 5, that kind of early part of the game, you're going to deal with monsters that are not that smart. We went over in the video how most basic monsters that you run into are not very bright, So you're going to have, like, for example, goblins, orcs, lizard men. Um, those are some of those really, and then all the undead, basically, other than maybe, again, there are some intelligent undead, but most aren't. Most are incredibly low intelligence, right?
right.
So, and that's how the game is made, and and the same thing with video games. I remember I mentioned that the Skyrim creator said they turned up the AI. They turn it up once in a while to see what would happen, and your character gets wiped out immediately. Well, so the same thing happens in D&D, because the dungeon master can do anything. So
Yeah,
they could bring out at any point a monster, an NPC, lightning comes out of the sky, rocks fall, everybody dies. Um, they can create a game that can be as tough as they want it to be. So that's not how the game's not designed to have intelligent, clever monsters who know what they're doing. That's Your characters would never make it to fifth level, to third level, right?
yeah,
So there's a lot of this in the game, and there's a few books these days that have been written about, again, overthinking it. One of my favorites is, in adventures they have a text box,
yeah,
and the box text is what the dungeon master reads to the players,
yeah,
and then underneath on the book, then it gives you the details the dungeon master has, like, maybe the simple strategy of the monsters, the treasure, and some other details. But the box text is what they read, right?
yeah. The
Well,
room
there's
looks pretty empty, and there's only a few things, and underneath is like, if the players go and step on this one square, the entire room explodes.
exactly. Well, there is a small group of people who are actually anti-box text.
What?
Yes, they they say that it's not necessary, or that it's a bad idea, or that it's um, kind of simplifying things. There's all these different intellectual arguments, although I must say, like, very low
Well, I was gonna say,
low
like, it's
intellectual
there to
argument.
like help the dungeon master like describe what's going on, but they don't necessarily have to use it. They could just use bits and pieces of it or describe it in their own way. But
Yeah, exactly,
to poo
exactly.
poo it because it's there, like
Oh,
what simplification? What are you talking about?
yeah. I mean, you have to think, how many adventures were written with, before somebody complained about it, and all those hundreds of adventures. So all those writers were, it wasn't a good idea, and all the people who bought those books who used them, had a problem with it. No, they didn't. Um, and then the whole idea that evil humanoids are supposed to represent someone in our world. These are ridiculous takes. But it's what happens when you over intellectualize a game, right? Um, and that's it's made its way into the hobby as well.
And that's the sad part about all of this. I mean, with the exception of a few companies here and there scattered around the planet, and then there's like the Critical Role and live streaming stuff like that. Um, it's supposed to be a hobby. Like it's supposed to be something you just go and you play. There's really not a lot of stress. You're just supposed to kind of, hey guys, how's it going? I got my dice. All right, I got this new dice. It's really cool. I'm gonna play with it tonight. It'll be fun. Did we? Oh, we got some snacks and drinks and stuff, and like, it's just and then it's become so serious, like it's about this ridiculousness with like the orcs represent I don't know purple people or something. Like it just makes no sense to me. And again, I guess sure if you want to play with restrictions around certain things because you don't like a description of something or if there's a line around a descriptive paragraph, like
Sure. Well, you can, yeah, like you say, you can do at your table what you want to do. Why do you have to run around trying to police other people, right?
actually that's a really good way to describe it. Policing the police, like gaming police. Like you're running around being like, I'm sorry, you didn't roll that dice fast enough. I'm sorry, you have to, I'd like to see you really toss that into the table. Like there's all kinds of ridiculous rules that people make up on the fly, and it's so sad.
Oh yeah,
And
and that sort of mentality is about control, right? And it's with playing, it's about controlling people and some kind of political agenda someone has. And then in the publishing side of things, it's trying to, isolate you and make sure that you're not seen, so you can't compete against their company. And even though you might have a better product, so all those things are going on. Um, but it's funny when you ask someone who doesn't know the game, like for the D&D experience, and they see you playing, like, um, one of my friends said a couple of years ago, you guys are just a bunch of people sitting around a table laughing for 4 hours,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's
And
true.
playing.
Yeah, and it's bizarre because there seems to be like some element to that I've read in places where uh, if you're playing this game as an adult, you shouldn't be playing. You grow up. You know what's wrong with you, and I really hate that stuff because being able to play any game, not just
Mhm.
D&D, but role playing has a far more powerful impact I think on people's mental their brain developing or whatever
Mhm.
repairing things or but it's the fact that that there's this element of people just saying like no you shouldn't be playing it because that's for the teenagers or that's for the young kids
Right,
and
right.
so and I completely disagree with that kind of stuff like that to me is what's wrong with 50 odd year old people running around a castle killing off infestation of some sort of creature and you know oh that doesn't sound very exciting well you haven't played yet so
Yeah,
therefore
yeah.
it is exciting it's kind of fun.
Well, I think, luckily a lot of that has changed. I think for the most part, like there's way more, um, many more adults now involved in gaming. And just think about parenting. There's way more parents now who play with their kids, and who joke around with their kids. And games have affect society, and play is definitely more. There's more play going on in adults' lives than ever before, and I think that's a really good thing. That's really healthy.
So how many sessions have you done with your daughter?
Well, she's still fairly young, so she hasn't had her attention span has not been great. So she's only played. I think she's done 3 sessions now. She really likes it, but there's so many other things
Oh, right.
that are competing for her attention, which is still kind of limited. Um, and if she gets into it, that would be great. She's played family games where um, it's my wife and her and myself, and we might play again over the holidays. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And if she gets into it, and that would be great. But there's a lot of other games. Like I said, games have exploded, and not just for adults, but for everybody. There's way more choices that she has than I had. Um, especially when I was a young kid in Africa, we had very, very limited, options. I mean, we didn't have TV. There were no, obviously there was no internet. There were no, no, no streaming services, no Blu-rays and DVDs and VHS. Um, all the Lego sets now, it's just unbelievable. The the uh, the variety and the size of these sets compared to what we had. Yeah, there. So I think gaming is in a great place and it's going to keep going. Um, and it would be nice if there were some more really ethical people involved. Would be great.
I've been reading lately about the whole. There's a bunch of people out there on the internet these days that are talking about, and this is fairly recent, at least as far as I can tell, about how not you don't necessarily have to add your opinion to every single thing. There is a moment where you can just be like, well, I don't really agree with that, but whatever,
Hmm.
have fun. And I don't think that there are very many, or sorry, I think there's a very small group, as you have alluded to many times, that there's a small group of people that are, I guess, I don't know, purists, but in a negative way. That you have to play this way, it has to be this thing, and the rules can't be changed, and just and they just become sourpusses, and you're kind of like, really, man, you can't just look at somebody and kind of go, well, I wouldn't do it that way, but have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of it when you are creating products for, this community, it actually does help you to realize again that there's many different kinds of players, many different kinds of people, especially with the monster series, because we had to think, well, some people like a lot of combat. Like I still like a lot of combat.
Right.
Um, and probably a lot of OSR, like original D&D players are like that. But some groups it's almost entirely role play. There's some groups that love like very fae based adventures with fairies and arc fae and unicorns, and then there's other players who kind of come from a Pokemon background who love their familiars and their mounts and their companions, right? So there's so many different kinds of players. There's like horror campaigns. Um, so when we made those books, it helps you to realize that. It helps you to go, okay, well, okay, here we're going to have a collection of monsters, creatures for people to use. But think of all the different kinds of tables that are out there. And, you're putting these things out and people are going to use them in lots of different ways, um, which I think is great. Like there's actually parents who've contacted me and they've said they use some of those books as bedtime stories to their kids.
Really?
Yeah, because
That's
they
awesome.
are each monster is basically it's a little story, at least one, sometimes many. And a lot of them are, if they're not based on folklore or a myth, there are our own creation of a folklore or myth, uh, of folklore and myth. And then I know one dad contacted me and he's homeschooling his kids and they've used some of those books. So, and then there are other people who just buy the books because they love Travis's art. I think the new world book, I think if you don't even play D&D, you're going to like that book, the Mirror book. Um, because it's a fantasy world and there's so many stories and relationships to read about and examine and get immersed in this very unique place. So there's obviously so many different ways to play and so many different people involved. There's still probably millions of people who play D&D around the world. For sure, hundreds of thousands of people. And I think it'd be great if people just let them play and imagine imagine what X would be like, or Blue Sky, or all these platforms if people were respectful and tolerant.
Of course.
you know um, but there's an easy way to deal with it. Like I said, the mute button, block. um, you don't have to get involved in that drama.
Well, especially when you can just kind of practice what I was saying, like, this guy's got an opinion about it, but I'm not gonna respond because who
Yeah,
play the game, man? Like, what's going on?
yeah, exactly. Like there are things that there's books and streaming shows and actual plays and YouTube channels that I can't stand. I can't even. I cannot watch for 5 minutes or and do I go on there into the comment section and start trolling people? No, I don't. Do I go on to X and complain and call them out? Nope.
Yeah,
Because
there's no point. There's really
no,
no point.
because the reason I'm making these, products is to, for a game to have fun, and that's what I'd like to do when I'm playing too. So the other stuff, it's noise.
That's actually the best way to describe it. It's noise that you can choose to ignore.
Yeah.
And, well, that was not the topic we are going to talk about tonight, but to be honest, it's a very good, December sort of quiet conversation about the community on a whole. Uh, be, by the way, for anyone who was not really paying attention, I was alluding to videos that Andrew was sharing with me in our back channel, and there a lot of them are talking about the drama in the gaming world right now. There's been layoffs and things like that, and
Hmm.
and a bunch of companies have been having some financial troubles. But ultimately, the ones that are being successful seem to be having some sort of social awakening. I think. Where a lot of the behavior that we've seen over the last year or so, um, they're I don't really want to put it this way, but they're getting what's coming to them, and that kind of stuff. But I'm sure there's a more eloquent way to put that. But anyway, um, you know, it's just a game, people, and I certainly hope that a lot of the gaming companies out there recover from the troubles they're having because even if I don't like the product or if I think the product is silly or dumb or whatever, I'm kind of happy they're making it because it's going to make somebody happy and it's going to hopefully allow somebody out there to have a better time at the table, whether they're running a game or just playing in one. So you know, the more the merrier. I mean, that's the reality with all this stuff. Uh, the more people that are actively playing the game, the more people that are actively creating product to hopefully make the game better. Um, I don't see anything wrong with that. Like I wish it would happen more often. That we would see more and more and more and more. But there you go. And at the beginning of this year, we're now at the end. The beginning, I mean, to the whole journey between January to December has been
Oh yeah.
astounding.
Oh, I was just looking back, clearing my emails, and there were emails. I sometimes email stuff to myself too, and I was getting, I was looking at the original version actually of this book, which I was working on editing it last December, so a year ago. And Then the OGL stuff hit in January when we came back after the holidays, and I rewrote the entire book and took all of 5e out of it.
Nice.
And then Wizards buckled and changed their minds, and then I had to rewrite the whole book back
Why
to
did I not
5e.
save that draft? No.
Oh, yeah. Oh no, I still had the original, but I had to we made some changes. So
Right.
we started working on those conversion tables so that you could take most of the stat block and then convert it to other games. And as I said, we're including those with all of our PDFs, and with the printed version, you get the Pathfinder tables in the back, the conversion tables, and then we'll give people a PDF of the other games, Old School Essentials and Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Nice.
And in the PDF version, I have to double check if it's all in there. If it's not, then we give it to you as well on a separate PDF. But yeah, a lot has happened in the last year. That's for sure. Um,
In retrospect, I mean, it's there was a real concern at the very beginning of the year that the company end of the game was going to die out because of choices that Wizards had made,
yeah,
um, and I just think that and here's the weird thing we've been talking about how there's this fractured community around a lot of stuff, which happens in any community. People are going to like and dislike things, whatever.
for sure.
But that was a moment that I think really kind of pointed out to myself that this community is far bigger than I thought that it was. There were a lot of game companies out there that were contributing to the community, like making their Pathfinder people and a bunch of other companies, and it also had a lot of companies pop out of the woodwork that said, "Hey, we're also here. We're a very small company. There's like 3 people that work here, but we have a very strong sense that this community is important to defend." And I loved that because then you had a list of like 10, 15 additional publishers that I'd never heard of before. I recognized some of their work, but never really thought about who they were as a company to produce stuff. And that was kind of heartening, at that time. Like oh my goodness, that there's this group of people that I've never heard of, and there's tons of them out there, and they all stood up and said, we're not cool with what you're doing, because don't forget, there's a bunch of us out here that are supporting you without any monetary exchange, without any you're not asking us to do stuff. We're doing it for the love of this art that we like called role playing. And D&D has been, the very first one out the gate really, to push it into the mainstream, not just being like a hobbyist kind of specialty game that only, people that are really really interested would actually get into. But TSR back in the day was like, hey, here you go. Here's the thing. We made some rules. It's pretty cool, pretty straightforward. And it grew from there. And I don't know. It just made me happy. And then I was sad for about a bunch of the year because of what was going on. And now I'm
Hmm.
kind of happy again. I'm kind of like, okay, we see this stuff going on, and at the end of the day, I hope more and more people just remember that it's only a game, and then they can, you know, play with others or not. If you want your own sandbox and play over there and not associate with everyone else, then that's fine. Just do that, but don't
Yeah,
hurl insults over the fence.
yeah, yeah.
Now I'm happy again. Be be good people, people. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Any final words before we sign out? Because we've been going for a while now.
I just hope everyone has a good holiday and a good Christmas. And yeah, we're gonna try to get out that backer kit as soon as possible to the mere people, the backers. Hopefully, it should be out before the end of the week. And I should say, we'll leave it up. We'll leave the surveys up till mid-January, so people have lots of time to make changes and put add-ons and give us their address so they can get their printed books. And yeah, I hope everybody has a good break, and really appreciate all the support we got this year. We ran two Kickstarters, um, two fairly big ones, and for us, and yeah, we really appreciate that we're able to have a relatively small group of people help us create what we do.
Well, I, for one, am happy you are being able to do it because there are tons of people that don't get to do it and never get around to it or too busy with life or whatever it is. So the fact that you're knocking these out of the park 2 in 1 year, I well done, um, and I appreciate it too because they're a great product. I like them. So, well, thank you everyone for listening and or watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, all of the links of anything that we might have talked about is link worthy will be down below, in the stuff down there, and we'll see you next time. Which we might are we taking next week off? Are we going to do a show next week?
I think we'll take a little break and we'll be back in January.
Very
Yeah,
cool. All right. Well, we'll see you all then. And if you want to share the show, do please tell people about it. We're uh, we do this for fun. This is not like it's not my day job. I'm here just because I'm cool, or something. Anyway, enough of this. All right. Thank you all, and we'll talk to you guys next week or the week after. Bye.
later.